Good afternoon, class. So this lecture deals with chapter one, all right, the human body and orientation. So essentially, in chapter one, we go over a lot of the terminology that you will be using in anatomy one and even in anatomy two when you take that course also. And whatever field you go into, you will also use the same terminology when you go into whatever doctor's office or hospital setting or nursing setting. You will use the same terminology. So all right, so anatomy is a study of the body points and their relationship to one another, and you will also be studying function. Okay, physiology is a study of the function of the body parts. All right, how everything works together to carry out your life-sustaining activities. So you have subdivisions of anatomy. So you have gross anatomy or macroscopic. So macro means large view, micros it's small view. So gross anatomy is what you can see with your eyes, visible structures that you can see, look in the lab when you're doing a dissection. Those are gross anatomy structures, okay, things that you can see with your eye. You can also study regional anatomy, which you look at structures in a particular area of the body, system anatomy, the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, muscular system, etc. And you also look at surface anatomy, okay, at internal structures as they relate to overlying skin. All right, so microscopic anatomy deals with structures too small to be seen with the naked eye. Okay, so when we look at slides in the lab, okay, if you're looking at studying tissues, that's histology. All right, if you're studying cells, cytology. Okay, so that's a big part of anatomy is microscopic. So you have to look at a lot of slides, a lot of tissues. Slides, a lot of cell slides. That's part of the anatomy lab. And then you have developmental anatomy. Okay, so that studies essentially what's going on during development from conception, you know, when the egg first gets fertilized until birth of the baby. Okay. All right, so again, physiology, you're going to be studying the function, okay? So again, anatomy is the structures. Physiology is the function, okay, of the structures. So you have subdivisions of physiology. So you have based on organ systems. You might just be focusing on the renal or the cardiovascular system. A lot of times, especially now, we know a lot more about molecular biology. So a lot of times you focus on the cellular and molecular levels of the body, how signals are passed on from, you know, hormones moving in the bloodstream and so forth and so on. So to study physiology, you must understand basic physical principles, okay? Same, like if you took a physics course, the same principles apply with pressure, and diffusion. Particles move from high concentration to low concentration. All right, all those pressure and movements, things that you learn in physics and chemistry, all those principles still apply in physiology. And just, you know, be aware that structure and function are going to complement each other, okay? So anatomy and physiology are going to be inseparable, meaning that the structure is going to be designed, all right, so that it enhances the function, okay? So they're the complementary, all right? Known as a principle of complementary of structure and function, okay? All right, so now we're going to talk about structural organization. All right, so how the human body is organized from the smallest chemical level to the whole organism. So again, if you remember from taking chemistry class, you know, you have atoms, right? Atoms come together and they make essentially elements. Elements are going to come together and make molecules. Molecules are going to make organelles. Organelles make up cells. Cells come together to make up tissues. Tissues come together to make up organs. Organs come together and make up organ systems, okay? And then organ systems work together to have the entire organism, all right? And again, the take-home message that I want you guys to understand is that everything has to work together, okay, in harmony, so that the organism is able to survive and live, okay? And we're going to talk about it a lot. Homeostasis, all right, essentially balance. The organism has to maintain balance so that it can survive and live, and it does that through the organ systems working together. So this slide just shows you what we just got through saying. Atoms come together to make up elements. Elements make up molecules. Molecules make up organelles. Organelles make up cells. Cells make up tissue. Tissues come together and they make up organs. Organs come together and they make up organ systems. And organ systems work together and they make up organism, the entire organism, okay? And we'll be talking about the different organ systems too, between Anatomy 1 and Anatomy 2. So, you know, a lot of the organ systems we will talk in more detail with in Anatomy 2, like the respiratory system, cardiovascular system, and so forth. All right, so the 8 necessary life functions. Again, you should know what its requirements for life. Okay, the 8 necessary life functions. So involves maintaining boundaries. So even if you look at a cell, which is a functional unit of life, okay, cells have maintained their boundaries. They have a cell membrane. Okay, that cell membrane maintains the boundaries. Okay. And if you're talking about the organism, like the human organism, our skin, right, maintains our boundaries from the outside. Movement, being able to respond, digestion, metabolism, excretion, reproduction, and growth. Okay, those are the 8 necessary life functions, and you should know these. All right, so again, just going a little bit more detail about the necessary life functions, maintaining boundaries. In order, so you can a lot of times you can think of the functions that go on in the human body, if you want to think of it as a machine, okay? So just like any machine, you need to be able to separate the internal from the external environment. So that you can harness energy, okay, and then that energy that you harness, then you can use that energy to build up things, proteins that build up structures that your body needs to make enzymes and so forth and so on, okay. But if you weren't able to separate the internal from the external environment, you wouldn't essentially be able to harness energy, okay, and then store that energy and then use that energy to grow, all right, and reproduce. So some of the boundaries that we got through talking about was the plasma membrane, right? Separates, far you looking at the molecular level with cells, okay? Plasma membrane separates the inside of the cell from the outside of the cell, all right? And then if you want to look at a more macroscopic level, you can look at your skin, all right? Your skin separates you, the organism, from the external environment, all right? And then movement, all right? Our muscle system allows us to move. Other animals have different ways of moving. Even cells, the sperm, for instance, has the flagella that it uses to move. So even at the cellular level, you have movement, Okay, but our muscular system at the macroscopic level is what allows us to move. And contraction refers to movement at the cellular level. Okay, and we're going to talk more about contraction of the muscles when we talk about the muscular system. All right. All right, so responsiveness. So again, you have to be able to sense and respond to stimuli. All right, we have a lot of reflexes that you don't really think about that respond to stimuli. Like you touch something hot, your hand's gonna immediately withdraw from it, right? Coughing, there's a cough, gag reflex. Okay, control of breathing. All right, we have a lot of reflexes, but we have a lot of ways that we have to be responsive to our external environment so that we can maintain homeostasis in our internal environment, okay? Because our external environment is going to always be changing, right? Even just within a day, it goes from, being relatively cool at night to hot during the day, and it could be cold during the winter, really, really hot during the summer, and so on and so on. And we have to be able to respond to that external environment while maintaining a essentially a normal balanced internal environment. You never want your internal environment to stray too far in one direction. All right, and then digestion, be able to break down food stuff, and that's how we, food is what we use for organisms that cannot make their own food. Okay. We have to digest food so that we can use that food to generate energy. All right, metabolism. So metabolism is essentially all the chemical reactions that occur in the body. So it's the sum of catabolism, which is breaking down molecules, and then the anabolic mechanisms, which is when you build things up. And the way I always remember the difference between catabolism and anabolic is essentially, I think about anabolic steroids, right? Anabolic steroids it builds you up, builds your muscles up. So I always remember anabolic. Okay, that's when you are synthesizing, building things up, and then I remember that catabolic, it's going to be the opposite of it. You're breaking things down. All right. But the metabolism is essentially all of those chemical reactions that occur in the body, building up and breaking down. And then excretion, you have to remove waste, okay, from metabolism and digestion, okay. All right, so reproduce. So cells are able to grow and reproduce and produce other cells. So you have reproduction at the cellular level, because skin cells, hair cells, they all grow, they die, and they need to be replaced. Okay, so they have to be replaced. And then you also have reproduction at the organism level. All right, when you produce offspring. And then you have growth, increase in size of a body part or of the organism. All right. So humans are multicellular. So remember, cells come together to form tissues. Tissues come together to form organs. Organs come together to form organ systems, and all the organ systems work together to form an organism. And all of the organ systems have to work together in order to maintain life. If your kidney fail, all right, you're not going to be able to survive. If your respiratory system fails, you're not going to be able to survive. If your heart fails, you're not going to be able to survive. So all the organ systems have to work together in order to maintain life. So this is just showing you the digestive and the respiratory system, and the urinary system, and the integumentary system. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is showing you 5 out of the 11 systems okay? But it's just showing you how they all work together. So you see right here, you have the respiratory system, okay? That's going to be what's going to take in oxygen and eliminate carbon dioxide, okay? And remember, all your cells need oxygen to survive. They can't survive without oxygen, okay? And it's the cardiovascular system, okay, that's going to transport this oxygen to the other organ systems, okay? And also, so it transports oxygen, but it also transports nutrients. So from the digestive system, you get your nutrients, okay? And the nutrients also are going to enter the circulatory system, the cardiovascular system, via the blood, and it's going to distribute the nutrients as well as the oxygen, and it's also going to gather the waste too. The waste also gathers in the blood, okay? So the blood is carrying nutrients, oxygen, the waste, all right, and all these things, and it's going to transport from organ to organ and get rid of what it needs to get rid of through the urinary system is one way to eliminate the nitrogen waste, okay, and excess ions, and then also when you excrete feces, that's also getting rid of waste, okay? But again, this is just showing you a small picture of the systems working together. These are 5 systems working together, and then you have the integumentary system, which is the skin, okay? Just a big word for skin, and it protects the whole body. You know, your body, like the blood, is mostly water, right? And your cells, the cytoplasm within the cells is mostly consists of water too, all right? And water is very important because the ions, they dissolve in the water, and chemical reactions take place in this water solution. So if you get dehydrated, so one of the reasons that 3rd-degree burns are really, really bad when you lose all your skin in a 3rd-degree burn is you essentially can die from dehydration because your skin is no longer there to prevent the fluids from leaving your body, okay? So we take skin for granted, but it plays a very, very important role also. All right, so integumentary system, we're going to just talk about each of the organ systems briefly. So again, that's your skin, forms the external body covering, and it protects the deeper tissue from injury, and also, which we don't think about a lot of times, which is why they tell you it's good to get some sunshine on your skin, is because your skin also synthesizes vitamin D, okay? And we need vitamin D that helps us absorb calcium, right? And our bones, our teeth, they all need calcium to have strong bones and strong teeth. You need calcium to be absorbed by your body, and vitamin D assists in your body absorption of calcium. Okay, you also have sweat glands and oil glands to help you when you get too hot. Sweat glands help you cool off, and then if you need to secrete oils, help you secrete oils. You have your oil glands and so forth, and pain and pressure receptors too. So skin has a lot of things that it does. Skeletal system. So again, that's going to be protect and support body organs. Okay, so essentially it's the framework, all right, for the muscles, all right. And then blood cells are formed in the bones, all right. We'll talk about that when we're talking more about the skeletal system later on in this course. But blood formation is something very, very important, right? And they store minerals. The bones store minerals, calcium, that we need, okay? For your skeletal muscles need calcium, your heart needs calcium, okay? So your body uses a lot of calcium in your bones and your teeth too, but it uses for other things also, and other minerals that your bones store. And also very important, without the skeletal system, right, without that framework for your muscles, you wouldn't be able to move, okay? All right, so muscular system allows us to manipulate our environment, allows us to move, maintain our posture, produce heat. All right. So muscular system, very important. And again, we'll talk about the muscular system in more detail later on in this course. All right. Nervous system. All right. So the control center of our body is the nervous system. All right. Our brain and the brain, spinal cord, and the nerves. In the central and peripheral nervous system. All right. So they essentially respond to the external changes that going on. The nervous system is going to tell our internal body to respond to whatever is happening externally. All right, allows us to do that, and also allows us to control what's going on internally too. Okay, so there's our internal monitors also, but it also allows us to respond to what's happening outside of our body. All right, so nervous system obviously very, very important, and we will talk about that later on in this course also too. All right, so the endocrine system, very, very important. Very, very important. Endocrine system works closely with the nervous system, okay, to regulate, growth, reproduction, metabolism, okay. Endocrine system, very, very important. Thyroid gland, adrenal glands, pancreas, pineal gland, pituitary gland. All right. I can't really stress enough. A lot of diseases that people have deal with the endocrine system. So if anything goes wrong with the endocrine system, a lot of times it's going to cause disease states. So a lot of diseases that people have to deal with are directly related to the endocrine system. With metabolism, hormones, and so forth. Okay, very, very important. But we talk mostly about the endocrine system and anatomy too, though. We don't talk that much about the endocrine system in anatomy 1. But again, the endocrine system works very closely with the nervous system. All right, so cardiovascular system. So blood vessels transport, like I said previously, oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, waste throughout the body, okay? And the heart is the pump, all right, for the blood being transported, all right? The heart is the pump. And again, cardiovascular system, that's another one that we talk about in great detail in anatomy too. Lymphatic system, again, we don't really talk about the lymphatic system until anatomy 2. But essentially, as the blood is going throughout the body, from the arteries to the veins, and it goes through the capillaries, some of the fluid's going to seep out, into the interstitial space. All right, and that's going to be that fluid is going to be picked up by the lymphatic system. Okay, and then you have lymphatic organs like the thymus and lymph nodes. Okay, that's very important for your immunity. It houses essentially white blood cells. They live there in lymph nodes, and essentially lymph nodes play an important role when it comes to your immune response. Okay, but again, we don't talk about the lymphatic system until anatomy 2. Respiratory system. So again, you have to breathe in oxygen. Our body, all our organs, all our cells, I should say, need oxygen to survive, and therefore, our cells make up our tissues make up organs. So therefore, all our organs need oxygen to survive. And we use, which we'll talk about also, we use what's called cellular respiration. We use oxygen to make the majority of our ATP, okay? So we will oxygen is very important, is what I'm trying to get at. So the respiratory system, starting with our nasal cavity, breathing in oxygen and getting all the way to our lungs, okay, the alveoli in our lungs, the little sacs in our lungs where gas exchange takes place. All right, that's very, very important because all our cells in our body need oxygen. And then the digestive system, again, we don't talk about this until the anatomy 2, but that breaks down food so that it can be absorbed by the body. So you might wonder, why do we need to break down food? Because it needs to be small enough so that our small and large intestines can absorb the nutrients, okay? All right, so if the food isn't broken down small enough pieces, then we can't absorb it to our bodies, okay? So that's very, very important. But again, we don't talk about the digestive system until anatomy 2. Urinary system eliminates nitrogen waste from the body, regulates water, electrolytes, acid-base balance of the blood. Very, very important. And the renal system actually plays a role also in regulating our blood pressure, okay? Just another way that these organ systems interact. But again, we don't talk about the urinary system until anatomy 2. Reproductive system, again, we don't talk about the reproduction system also until anatomy 2. But you have the male reproductive system, which produces sperm. Then you have the female reproductive system, which produces the eggs. But again, we don't talk about the reproductive system until anatomy 2. And this is just showing you the female reproductive system. Alright, so survival needs. So again, our body needs certain things in order for it to maintain homeostasis. Okay, it needs nutrients because that's the energy source. All right, without nutrients, you can't produce energy, and you need energy to build up. Things where you need to for growth and metabolism. You need energy for all those things that go on with growth metabolism. Without that, they couldn't take place. And then again, oxygen. Oxygen is also used in cellular respiration. All right, cellular respiration is when cells generate energy. All right, and oxygen is the final electronic acceptor. Okay, it's the final electron. It generates water essentially, but without oxygen, you can't generate enough ATP for the body to function. Okay, you need it for cellular respiration, which generates the majority of the ATP for the body. All right, and again, water is very, very important. Majority of our blood is water. Majority of the fluid in the cytoplasm of our cells is water. And if you remember from chemistry, right, water is a great solvent. So a lot of chemical reactions take place in water. Okay, it's a very, very good solvent, and for chemical reactions to take place. All right. Of proteins in your body are enzymes, okay, and just proteins in general too. But essentially, at a certain temperature, proteins are going to degrade, okay. So especially if this protein is a enzyme, once it degrades, it's not going to be functional, okay. And a lot of diseases in your body are the result of just from having enzymes that don't function properly. All right, like digesting certain food, you can't eat certain foods. A lot of times it's because you don't have the enzyme to break down that particular food. Okay, so enzymes are very important in maintaining body temperature. Has a lot to do with maintaining the not too hot, not too cold, for your proteins and your enzymes to work properly. All right, and the same thing with atmospheric pressure, especially even with breathing. You don't really think about it, but when you breathe in and breathe out, okay, um, that deals with pressure going from high to low, and it also deals with your lungs expanding, um, um, and which changes when your volume increases in your lungs, you have more space. So if you have more space, then the gas in there is making less pressure. So air moves from outside your body, through your nose and into your lungs from high to low. It always moves in the pressure gradient, okay? But when you go up to where it's higher above the sea level, okay, the atmosphere pressure changes, okay, and it becomes more difficult to breathe and so forth. All right, all those have to deal with, chemistry and physics of the way your body functions. Things naturally flow from high to low pressure gradients, okay? And we need it to generate energy, okay? And you need that energy to build, proteins or fat for storage and so forth and so on, and for any chemical reactions that are occurring within the cell. All right, and then also minerals and vitamins. You may wonder, why do you need minerals and vitamins? It's because a lot of those minerals and vitamins are coenzymes. So essentially, without them, chemical reactions within the cell can't take place, essentially. Okay, so that's why you need a lot of these vitamins and minerals, because they're coenzymes. A lot of them are coenzymes, and these chemical reactions that you need for your body to function can't take place without them. And then again, oxygen. All right, so again, cells need oxygen. We can only survive a few minutes without oxygen. And again, oxygen is used for cellular respiration, which is used to generate the majority of our ATP in our body, okay? All right, so again, water. Again, we need the water environment for chemical reactions to take place. Normal body temperature. So again, it's going to affect chemical reaction rates. So I talked about how proteins can get denatured, but also it can affect the speed of chemical reactions. Okay, so that's also very important. And again, atmospheric pressure. We need it for breathing. So like if you go up very high above sea level, it becomes more difficult to breathe. That's because as you go up, think about it this way. You don't really think about it, but gas has pressure, all right? And if you're on the ground, okay, at sea level, all that air above you, it has pressure coming down on you, okay? It gives you greater pressure. And as you go up higher, okay, above the sea level, there's less air above you, right? So there's less pressure. The air isn't as has less pressure, and it becomes more difficult to breathe, okay? All right, so homeostasis. When you think of homeostasis, all right, just think about balance, okay? Homeostasis, essentially your body maintaining equilibrium, maintaining balance, okay? And again, all organ systems contribute to homeostasis, all right? And the nervous system is really the brain, the control center of maintaining homeostasis. It interacts with, the other your muscles and so forth, and other organs to adjust internally to what's going on internally, and also adjust to what's going on externally outside your body, okay? So again, the body has to be monitored and regulated to maintain homeostasis. Nervous and endocrine system, they always work hand in hand, so very closely together. So when you're dealing with homeostatic control, you have some type of receptor that's sensing either a chemical or a physical change. or pressure change. It could be pressure change or chemical change. You have a control sensor, and then you have an effector. Essentially, what happens after the control sensor determines what needs to be done. Okay, it sends out the signal, the effector. All right, so the receptor monitors the environment. It's going to respond to the stimuli. All right, the control center, it's going to determine, it's going to take the data, right? It's going to determine what needs to be done. So it's going to take the data from the receptor. And again, a lot of times the control center is the brain. But then with reflexes, a reflex is called a reflex because it doesn't go all the way up to the brain. It just goes to the spinal cord. But for the majority of the things, the control center is going to be the brain. Okay, so it receives the input from the receptor, which could be a receptor on your skin. It could be a receptor, a pressure receptor, in your heart. It could be different receptors. It could be chemical. It could be pressure. It could be different things, okay? But whatever the receptor is, it's going to send input to the control center, which is usually the brain, and then it's going to determine the appropriate response. All right, then the effector, so it's going to receive the output from the control center. All right, a lot of times it's going out to, it could be to an organ, a gland, to a muscle, okay? So the effector could be different things. It could be organ, gland, muscle, and so forth. But it's going to receive that output from the control center. Then it's going to respond. Either it's going to enhance the stimulus or it's going to reduce it. Okay. And most of the feedback loops in the body, most of them are negative feedback loops. Okay. There's only a few positive feedback loops in the body. Most of them are negative feedback loops. All right, so negative feedback is the most used feedback mechanism in the body. So essentially the response reduces or it shuts off the original stimulus, okay? So examples, regulation of body temperature, regulation of blood glucose by insulin. So essentially, the reason why the majority of the control mechanisms or negative feedback loops is because, just think of it this way, you don't want anything to always be on. You don't want anything always to be on, usually in your house, and you don't want things to always be on in your body. When something's always on, it's going to burn out eventually, right? So if you turn things off, it's going to keep it from burning out. So essentially, to maintain homeostasis and to keep things from essentially also wearing out, the body uses these negative feedback loops to reduce responses and essentially shut things off, shut off the stimulus. Because essentially, once your body responds to that stimulus, it no longer needs to keep going in that direction, or it's going to go too far in that direction. Think of it that way too. All right, so again, examples of negative feedback are receptors sense an increase in blood sugar, which is glucose. All right, and then the pancreas is going to secrete insulin, okay? And then the insulin causes cells in your body to take in more glucose, so it's going to red the glucose out of the blood. It's going to take glucose out of the blood into the cells, which decreases the blood glucose levels, okay? And essentially, once your blood glucose levels are low, all right, then you no longer have that need for that demand for insulin. Once the blood and the glucose in your blood has been cleared out, you no longer have that need for insulin. So that negative feedback loop shuts off, stops the pancreas from secreting insulin. Okay, when you no longer have that need. All right, so this is just showing you how, again, you can think of homeostasis as balance, right? You have a stimulus, which is usually going to result in some kind of imbalance, all right? And then you have the receptor detects the change. The control center decides what to do with the information, and then it sends out a signal to an effector, which it could be an organ, a gland, a muscle. It could be different things. Okay, and then that effector is going to have a response. All right. So the response to the effector feeds back to reduce the effect of the stimulus and returns the variable back to homeostatic levels. Okay. So again, just remember the control center is usually the brain, and afferent. When we get to the nervous system, you hear the word afferent and efferent pathway a lot. Afferent is always going toward signal going, input going to the brain. Efferent pathway is always leaving the brain, going to the effector. Okay, muscle, gland, so forth. Rises, so you have thermal temperature sensitive cells in the skin. Says that the temperature's gone up, and it sends that signal to the control center, thermoregulatory center in the brain, all right, through the afferent pathway. Then through the efferent pathway, it sends a signal to the sweat glands for you to sweat, all right, and that sweat causes your body to cool, all right, and then once your body cools, the stimulus is essentially ends, okay, and you maintain your homeostasis. All right, so this is just showing you what happens when you get cold. All right, in this case, stimulus is cold, body temperature falls. Your skin and receptors send that signal to the brain. All right, and then this time, your brain tells your effector to the skeletal, sends through the afferent pathway to the skeletal muscles is your effector this time, and you shiver. All right, and shiver is going to generate heat. Your body temperature rises, and then the stimulus ends. Okay. One of the main ones is when you cut yourself and you have to stop the bleeding, okay, platelet plugs and block blood clotting, okay. That's going to be an example of positive feedback, okay. So essentially with positive feedback, you are you're amplifying the signal. You're amplifying the signal. So when you cut yourself, you want to form a blood clot. Essentially, platelets and other factors. There are some factors like muscle cells in that area. They automatically constrict, and the inflammatory response attracts more platelets and so forth and so on. It's like an amplifying effect, and it's going to amplify until you get the end result, which is a blood clot formation. Okay. So in this case, you get a break or tear in a blood vessel wall. So the positive feedback cycle is initiated. Platelets are going to adhere to the sites. So just by getting a cut in a blood vessel, normally intact, smooth blood vessels, they don't attract platelets. But as soon as you get a cut, okay, platelets are going to adhere to that site. And then they're going to release chemicals that's going to attract more platelets, okay? So that's that positive feedback loop. So they keep release chemicals that attract even more platelets, and then eventually you end up with a plug. A platelet plug is formed. All right. And then once that platelet plug is formed, okay, then that signal that the torn blood vessel was giving out that was attracted platelets is no longer there. Okay, so then platelets stop being attracted to that area when that platelet plug is formed. So again, any homeostasis, anything that's going to disrupt the homeostatic balance is going to cause disease. Okay, so essentially, as we get older, our control systems become less efficient. You see more disease states in older people. All right, because our control system becomes less efficient over time. All right. And again, if negative feedback mechanisms become overwhelmed, then you get destructive. Positive feedback can take over things like heart failure and so forth. All right, so I'm going to stop here for part 1 of chapter 1, and I'm going to finish chapter 1 and part 2 in another lecture, just because I don't want the file to be so big, so I don't want to keep talking. So I'm going to stop right now for chapter 1, and then I'm going to pick up on chapter 1 part 2 on this slide, anatomical terms.